Welcome to our webinar to celebrate the 35th anniversary of PANAAWTM. My name is Kwok Pui Lan from Canberra School of Theology. PANAAWTM stands for Pacific, Asian, and North American Asian Women in Theology and Ministry. We began as a small group of Asian and Asian American women who were enrolled in theological schools or worked in ministry in Northeast US. Several of our early members from the West Coast had been active in Pacific Asian Center for Theology and Strategies. When we began, we were graduate students, and this network, relying completely on volunteers, has expanded over the years. We especially want to welcome our Asian sisters who are joining us tonight. To know more about our work, please visit our website, panaawtm.org, follow us on Twitter @PANAAWTM, and look at our YouTube channel, where you can find recordings of our past webinars. I would like to invite Dr. Jung-Ha Kim, Chair of the PANAAWTM Board, to say a few words of welcome.
Good evening. And those of us who are joining us from Asia, good morning. My name is Jung-Ha Kim, and I'm the chair of the board of directors of PANAAWTM. As you know, PANAAWTM is undergoing some significant and exciting changes. We're now a nonprofit organization. We have new website that's more interactive, and you can make donations more safely. We are offering our mentoring sessions all year round for seminarians and master's degree students and doctoral students, especially from Southeast Asian countries. We also offered 3 largely attended webinars since the coronavirus pandemic. As you could tell, we have been very busy and trying to carry on and do the right things in these times of difficulties and challenges. But tonight, this webinar is to gather and to celebrate the 35th anniversary of PANAAWTM. PANAAWTM is 35 years old. Like humans, organizations also have their life courses as well. 35 years of continuous existence as a gathering, as a network, and a movement definitely calls for a big celebration. And it also calls for an inventory and reflections in order for us to prepare for another 35 years to come. And we would like to take this opportunity to give thanks to all supporters and funders, as well as the seminaries and centers that have hosted our annual conferences. Thank you. It's your partnership and support that enabled PANAAWTM to carry on with our missions. And we have a fantastic array of panelists today who will be sharing their experiences and reflections of PANAAWTM. I look forward to listening and to learning from them. And I would also like to give special thanks to VOA, Volunteers of America, for providing this technical support and forum. And lastly, as a way to celebrate 35 years of PANAAWTM, the board of directors has launched a fundraising effort, and we have pledged and collected $4,325.12. That is $4,325.12. And I'd like to challenge every one of you for a matching fund. And together, maybe we could raise or working toward raising $10,000 by the end of this year. Would you please consider making a pledge or donation to PANAAWTM? Now more than ever, I am reminded of the mission of PANAAWTM and the commitment to make our faith journeys relevant to the health, politics, and everything that we do as active members of our communities. As Puilan has shared, PANAAWTM started as a support system for seminarians and graduate students, and it's now grown to be a national and international community for its constituents. And I am very proud and grateful to be part of PANAAWTM. And I wish you too would continue to find PANAAWTM as a home where you could experience camaraderie, solidarity, and sisterhood. Please consider supporting, volunteering, donating, lending your hands and expertise and skills, and check out our website to get involved. Thank you, and be safe, and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you very much, Jong-ha. I am one of the co-founders and belongs to the first generation of PANAAWTM. Tonight, we have an intergenerational panel to share with us how the panelists have been connected with PANAAWTM and their hope for the next 35 years. Our four speakers come from diverse ethnic backgrounds and cultures. Please use our chat room, monitored by Nami Kim, to post your comments and questions. Our first speaker is Dr. Grace Kao, Professor of Ethics at Claremont School of Theology and visiting professor in the Department of Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University. She's the author of Grounding Human Rights in a Pluralist World and the co-editor of two anthologies, Asian American Christian Ethics and Encountering the Sacred, Feminist Reflections on Women's Lives. Dr. Kao is the first Taiwanese American and first Asian American woman to have earned tenure at Claremont School of Theology some years ago. Dr. Kao.
Thank you, Puilan, for that. Let me just set up my show here. It's an honor to be part of this celebration, and in the 8 minutes I've been allotted, I just want to share some of my experiences. So unlike a number of my faculty colleagues, I joined PANAAWTM relatively late in my career. So I finished grad school in 2003. I had my first job 2003 to 2009. And during that time, people like Christine Pei and Kirsten Old told me about PANAAWTM, but for various reasons, I did not attend, and I'd be happy to explain why. So I only started coming in 2012, 3 years into my current job at Claremont School of Theology. And that was the first meeting, again, it was at SFTF, San Francisco Theological Seminary. And I did not know what to expect. And I got instructions that said, bring a gift for a gift exchange. And I didn't know what that was about. And I've since learned it's a time-honored tradition. I was also told to bring water, 3 ounces of water from a source of nature close to me. And that ended up being a part of a beautiful ritual, a beautiful opening ritual. We were also told to bring a mug because the conference organizers wanted to go green. And so what stood out to me in this first conference was how much of a community I was joining. It was clear that these were women who knew each other, who supported one another. I was very happy to see people speaking Korean to one another very freely, their own native tongues. And then when I, as a non-Korean, would join the group, they would switch to English, to be inclusive. So I was very, very pleased to see that. Through the years, I quickly got involved. The organizer said, hey, Grace, will you run a workshop? Hey, will you be on this panel? Hey, will you moderate this session? I then was asked to be on the board of advisors. And what kept me coming to PANAAWTM was the fact that I felt like this was an organization where I could help the younger generations, that I could be part of mentoring doctoral students and MDivs and MAs. I could develop peer relationships with faculty colleagues, and I could learn from and receive wisdom and mentoring from my senior colleagues. And beyond that, PANAAWTM is just a lot of fun. There's always dancing. Gail Yee is usually leading some fun, combination of steps. Rita's closing, stuff down with her disco days. Jung-Ha's banging on drums. There's always really, really good food. So beyond just, the scholarship and the professional development, it's just a really, really fun place to be. The other ways that PANAAWTM has helped me and allowed me to change my scholarship is that I have had opportunities to publish with younger doctoral students. So in 2 PANAAWTM anthologies, I was invited to contribute and also co-author pieces. And these were really fantastic opportunities. And I just really love that collegial mentorship relationship I was able to develop with Shirley and Lisa, and you're going to hear from Lisa later on tonight. And then beyond my being a part of PANAAWTM scholarship, I have seen my PANAAWTM sisters contribute to work that I myself was doing, or do endorsements, book reviews, help me get the blasted things published. So PANAAWTM has absolutely been something wonderful personally and professionally in my scholarship and my professional development. Happy anniversary, PANAAWTM. I hope I'm around for 35 more years. I'm excited about the new talent that we have. Again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel.
Thank you very much, Grace. Our second speaker is Keun-Joo Christine Pei, who is from Korea. She is Associate Professor of Religion Ethics and Women's Gender Studies at Denison University in Greenville, Ohio. She is also the chair of the Religion Department. Trained as a social ethicist, her research and teaching interests include womanist, feminist, spiritual activism, faith-based popular activism, transnational feminist ethics, religion ethics of peace and war, U.S. overseas military bases, and military prostitution. Dr. Pei.
Good evening, everyone, and good morning. Good night to my kids. So PANAAWTM is my chosen community and home away from home. I first attended the PANAAWTM meeting in April 2002, about 1.5 years after coming to the United States as an international student from South Korea. April 2002 was a precarious time for me. The US war in Afghanistan escalated. The US government introduced the SAVIS system to regulate international students' presence in the country. And George W. Bush was going to declare North Korea as an axis of evil. So at that time, I felt scared, isolated, invisible, and even hated. My divinity school did not teach anything related to Asian and Asian American feminist perspectives. The school's curriculum was Eurocentric. Yes, we read a lot of dead white men, as well as feminist theology with French accents. My feelings of isolation and marginalization became unbearable when one of my white feminist professors told me that my feelings came from the absence of Asian feminist role models in theological education. To make a long story short, I attended the PANAAWTM annual conference because my former faculty advisor, Lady Russell, encouraged me to go. I liked PANAAWTM offering a scholarship for students. Otherwise, I would not be able to attend the conference. At first, I was scared because I was not in Asian and Asian American feminist space before. Kwak Pil-lan, Rita Nakashima-Brock, and Jung Hyun-kyung, whose names I heard but whose work I've never read at school, set up snack tables and mentored people. I felt at home. It is still hard to describe what I felt at the time. I was just happy to be myself. So I danced on the table. I attended Gail Yee's How to Apply to a PhD program. I followed her advice. In 2 years, I would be admitted to the doctoral program at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. Lai-Ling Ng-An's Bible workshop introduced me to an Asian American feminist reading of the Bible. I spent the whole night talking to other Korean international students about the difficulties and challenges of living in voluntary exile. As I shared my first PANAAWTM conference, I remember every part of the meeting. Rita Nakashima Brock wore really long black hair. And in 2002, PANAAWTM celebrated its 18th anniversary, and Kwak Pil-an said that her daughter was small when she first participated in PANAAWTM, but now an adult. In 2020, Kwak Pil-an is a grandmother. And Bo-Young Lee, Dean of Iliff School of Theology, who just finished her PhD, drove me around Boston to show the city. Nami Kim, professor at Spelman College, was a doctoral student at Harvard Divinity School at that time. Can you believe that Bo-Young Lee and Nami Kim have volunteered to be my big sisters for the last 18 years? We are now working together to organize PANAAWTM conferences and launch new Asian American feminist theological projects. Newly found friendship, seasoned through multiple annual meetings, keeps bringing me back to PANAAWTM again and again. I've met so many friends, big sisters, and mentors through PANAAWTM. Especially PANAAWTM has a lifelong mentorship program. As I said earlier, when I was an MDiv student, I was mentored how to apply to a PhD program and pursue ordination. As a doctoral student, I was mentored on how to research Asian and Asian American feminist studies, theologies, and ethics when I could not find any experts in these areas in my graduate school. And how to write a dissertation proposal and finish your dissertation, and finally, how to apply to a job. Before going to a job interview, PANAAWTM mentors and big sisters read my professional statement, discussed the possible interview questions, and checked out my outfits and shoes for the interview. As a pre-tenured faculty, I also enjoyed workshops and mentorship for early career faculty. These experiences now help me mentor younger generation PANAAWTM members and my students at Denison University. PANAAWTM led me to explore other professional development opportunities through the Asian Theological Summer Institute and Wabash Center for Teaching and Learning Theology and Religion. If friendship and mentorship have grounded me in PANAAWTM, its cutting-edge scholarship has always inspired me to interrogate US exceptionalism, militarism, and neoliberal capitalism from a transnational feminist lens. I have published about 30 book chapters and journal articles. These publications are classified into three groups: a transnational feminist ethical piece, Asian transnational feminist theology and ethics, and feminist spiritual activism. My effort to elaborate on a transnational feminist ethical piece was fruitful thanks to my PANAAWTM big sisters, Nami Kim and Keun-Joo's 2 edited volumes, Critical Theology Against US Militarism in Asia and Feminist Praxis Against US Militarism. My chapter in Asian American Christian Ethics, edited by Grace Gao and Ilsa Ban, fleshes out my understanding of Christian ethic of peace and war from an Asian American perspective. I take prostitution industries around US military bases in South Korea as a site of producing critical knowledge about war, militarism, and US exceptionalism. When I bring this knowledge to the US Academy of Religion, I have been intellectually challenged by PANAAWTM theologians, challenged by PANAAWTM theologies, including dialogical imagination, historical imagination, diasporic imagination developed by Kwak Pil-an, transnational feminism, and God as interstitial integrity, moral injury by Rita Nakashima Brock, and so many other topics. I recently wrote an essay introducing Asian Trans-Pacific North American feminist theology, entirely based on PANAAWTM theology and biblical scholarship. This piece will be published through Routledge's series on women's studies in religion. I'm grateful that PANAAWTM has created theological and feminist languages available to formulate critical moral discourse on war, militarism, and violence, and to imagine and reimagine practical peace and justice. In celebration of the 30th anniversary of PANAAWTM 5 years ago, I wrote the chapter titled 3 Tales of Wisdom for Sue Park and Jung-Ha Kim's edited volume, Leading Wisdom, introduced by Grace Gao. That chapter engages with 8 different PANAAWTM members, including founding members and newcomers. Writing this essay, I found that friendship and mentorship are the 2 critical factors to bring people to PANAAWTM again and again. While friendship is vital to sustaining PANAAWTM, it can also give newcomers and outsiders a false message that PANAAWTM is a closed circle. Based on Corpulent's concept dialogical imagination, I imagine the future friendship of PANAAWTM is transnational and transgenerational, creating transgenerational memories. As a 2.5 generation of PANAAWTM, this is self-identification. I want to continue participating in creating the space of transnational memories and transgenerational memories, welcoming newcomers and mentoring younger generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Our first speaker is Miss Esther Shanti Parajuli, who is an Naga Napoli. She's a PhD candidate in systematic theology at Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. Her research explores the nexus between spirituality, critical theory, and liberation theology. Her dissertation integrates postcolonial theory, apophatic theology, and liberation theology to explore the ways in which the relation between the logic of sameness and difference are configured in our understanding of self and others. Esther.
Good evening, everyone, and good morning, and happy 35th anniversary of PANAAWTM. My first PANAAWTM meeting was in 2014, fall semester. It was a regional PANAAWTM at Union Theological Seminary. One of the presenters in that session was Keun-Joo, and I remember her presentation title was Border Dwellers. It was a very powerful reflection on the complexity a diasporic subject embodies and holds when it comes to home. She concludes her presentation with a challenge to claim the borderlands as our homeland and to construct an ethical diasporic community. And that first meeting was one of the moments in PANAAWTM where I felt seen as an international South Asian woman navigating academia in United States, because 2014 fall semester was also my first academic semester in United States. It was very challenging semester for me. It was a time marked by such raw vulnerability. Vulnerability because I left home. And for me, that meant I left behind familiarities. I have left behind that familiar faces, that familiar setting, familiar language, and familiar community. So here I was feeling split between my desire to pursue studies in US and a desperate yearning for home. And in my first PANAAWTM meeting, my cohort was calling me to reimagine borderland as my homeland and to create an ethical diasporic community. I was like, yes, I want that. I want to be part of that ethical diasporic community. So I always returned to PANAAWTM, where I met brilliant women and built a community. Currently, as mentioned, I am in dissertation phase, and I am part of a writing group with women whom I developed friendship in PANAAWTM conferences. In some ways, I knew them before PANAAWTM, but it was our time in PANAAWTM that kindled the friendship, PANAAWTM created an environment to nourish that friendship, community among women from different backgrounds. What a gift. And I received this gift from PANAAWTM with much gratitude. PANAAWTM, Pacific Asian and North American Asian, is a very broad identity marker. I am an Ao Naga Nepali woman, and I am yet to meet people from that particular background in PANAAWTM. Hopefully very soon I will. Nevertheless, I truly appreciate this effort towards cultivating relationship across vast web of difference, especially because we live in a culture that values the logic of sameness. Sameness is prioritized to build community, and the difference is always viewed as an external threat that needs to be dealt with. The cultural and political scope of this imagination comes into focus when we look at our global political scenario in the 2010s, with Trump serving as the President of United States of America, Israel's Netanyahu becoming the country's longest serving prime minister, the re-election of Narendra Modi in India, alongside Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, and a resurgent European far right. One would be hard-pressed to find a region of the world where hatred and anger for the different other is not found. Trump won the 2016 election chanting, "Build a wall." The wall is a cultural symbolism for separatism, and there is a categorical relationship between the wall, identity purism, and xenophobia. The reason for this fear of the different other are many and complex, but one culprit is easily named: purity. Within a framework of purity, human beings are confined within arbitrary concrete boundaries and reduced to pre-established concepts. Any form of multiplicity under a purity regime is repudiated, and ambiguity is often reduced and exorcised. Those who do not conform to this clear, crisp ordering of society are controlled by labeling them as illegal or perverse, because attributing such labels put the subject beyond dispute and further helps to reinforce conformity to neat ordering. The major idea operating in this logic of sameness are separateness, insisting an understanding of self untouched by the other. It is also only by absolutizing the difference between within and without, above and below, with and against, that a pure singular self is created. In such imagination, the different other are articulated as site of pollution, danger, fear, and anxiety. This approach to difference relies on the dirtiness and strangeness of the other. This pollution anxiety supposes that difference does not emerge internally, but only externally. That is exactly why it threatens the purity of the self. This is antithesis of relationality, which insists porous and messy becoming, where difference is not erased, but it refuses to understand difference within solid borders. And if we account our lived experience as women of color, I believe we can feel the tender pulse of the relation between sameness and difference, fashioning the self and the other. We realize difference is not separation of self from the other, but difference is an effect of the interdependency of the self and the other. And the hope is that PANAAWTM will continue to create more space to nurture community across vast web of difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker is Miss Lisa Asedillo Pratt, who is a mixed-race Filipino-American and a PhD candidate in religion and society at Duke University, with a concentration in social ethics. The title of her dissertation is The Colonial Hope as Praxis, Pedagogical Strategies of Freedom in the Philippines. She has been a PANAAWTM member since being a student at Union in 2012. She's a member of the New Day Church in the Bronx and is teaching global ethics remotely at Phillips Exeter Academy this fall. Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to be here tonight to celebrate the legacy of PANAAWTM on its 35th anniversary. I wanted to begin by speaking the name of Breonna Taylor. And I wanted to begin by asserting that the killing of a young Black woman and a young Black man and another Black body and another Black life again and again and again, year after year, with no indictment, from a system that travels the world as global model of advanced civilization, as global model of Christian morality, as savior, as helper, as rational and effective, and as having answers, with its guns and its bombs and its soldiers and its conspiring in the death of others for the purpose of gain, its ability to go on in this genocidal delusion for the span of its existence. The murder of Breonna Taylor by this system is related to mass graves and genocidal colonial wars in Asia, the US militarization of the world and our own neighborhoods, is related with patriarchal conclusions about the proper uses of power in the world, and is intimately related with our purpose for gathering tonight, which honors the gathering leadership and embodied knowledge of our diaspora, of Pacific, Asian, North American, Asian women in theology and ministry. We gather to celebrate today and honor our history, our 35 years of paving paths and tributaries, creating spaces, building community, honoring our stories and songs, our paradigms. But we also gather to mourn, knowing that central to the necessity of our gathering is the need for our resistance and refusal. PANAAWTM is only 1 year older than me, which is meaningful because my godmother, my Ninang Elizabeth Tapia, was one of the founding mothers of PANAAWTM. And it was she who imagined beyond her economic conditions, fought her way through immigration officials, got her student visa when they tried to deny her repeatedly. She knew that God was sending her, and she would not take no for an answer. I know this story because PANAAWTM published an anthology called Leading Wisdom, and my Ninang Eli's story was featured. I know my godmother's story because PANAAWTM values Asian women's theology and interpretive authority, and PANAAWTM records these stories as knowledge and as history. After she went to the Pacific School of Religion to pursue theological education, my mother soon followed in her footsteps, and it was there that she met my father. So PANAAWTM is very connected to my personal reason for being. At my first PANAAWTM conference in Ohio, I went with my younger sister, and I remember in the beginning, we stood in the doorway wondering if people would ask us why we were there. As you may be able to tell, I am mixed race. My dad is white American from Ohio. My mother is Filipina. My mother, Rebecca Asadillo, whose name I wanted to speak because she has also paved paths for Asian feminist theology and ministry where there were none, is Filipina. And I lived in the Philippines as a child from the ages of 4 to 8. And I cherish those memories of the Philippines as home. I carry white privilege and the embodied history of that relation between the US and the Philippines. But I also have a sadness that my Filipina child self, who remembers a different worldview, a different language, remembers experiencing life from a different place, is not quite visible on my face. and doesn't always feel mirrored back to me. So at that first conference, I wasn't sure if Nora and I would be met with confusion. But instead, I got to share my mother's lullaby as worship. And it was held, and I was seen. I am still reaping the benefits of my godmother fighting for her visa and all the women who came together to build language, space, and community for the next generations. There are too many mentors from PANAAWTM that I could speak to do it justice in the time allotted. But I wanted to just mention one in particular, Dr. Supak. I need to give her a shout out. She is the wind beneath many of our wings. She is somebody you can, I've cried in her office several times. Every song I've sang, she's accompanied. And I meet her monthly for spiritual direction, where she points me back to God and myself. And there are, again, many stories like that. I want to just close with, I found in my dissertation research, I found a final paper that my mom wrote for her systematic theology class at PSR in 1981. And I just want to close with the thoughts she was having when she was around my age. What is the incarnation? This is it. Is it not God being in the flesh, living amongst, and thereby affirming people of flesh and blood, who, to maintain such nature, must be fed, clothed, and given shelter? What is salvation, if not a freeing from all forms of oppression that keep enslaved the body, soul, and spirit, which have been divided long enough in the past for the church to legitimize its all-consuming passion for the saving of souls, while the rest of the person could go hang? What is evangelism, if not action declaring that freedom is available? Who is Jesus, if not the concrete realization of what once appeared as an abstraction, being the fullest demonstration and embodiment of divine intervention in human history? What is the church's task, if not to act upon the reality that God is in the midst of God's people, who are meant to be free, not enslaved, and is in fact acting to liberate them from their shackles, be they material poverty or spiritual callousness? Where is the church in all these? So may we continue to build, share, and imagine together. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of you may wonder why we have chosen such a long name that sometimes we forget which one goes first, And then, so I just want to say a little bit, because Esther, you also mentioned, we have this such an inclusive and expansive name. In the beginning, we were just Asian women theologians. Then we thought we needed to add the Asian Americans. So we became AAWTM, AWTM, Asian and Asian American Women in Theology and Ministry. And then when we recognized we should certainly include the Pacific Islander women, it became Pacific. And the Canadians reminded us we cannot just have Asian American, because sometimes we forget Canadians are also in this continent. That is why now it is so long, PANAAWTM. So tonight, one of our sister organizations, Asian Women's Resource Center for Culture and Theology, located in Taiwan, wants to congratulate us on our 35th anniversary. I would like to invite Reverend Xiaoying Chen, coordinator of the center, to address us.
Hello, everybody. This is Xiaoying, and I would like to say good night to everybody and good morning to all the sisters from Asia, like me. Yeah, it is our great honor to be part of this special moment, so AWRC can express our heartfelt joy and congratulations on this celebration. The 35th celebration of PANAAWTM is indeed a milestone, as I can hear those sisters this morning and night share with us how the PANAAWTM can be mentor and brings impact and inspirations to all of its members. So I think it's not only 35 years, but it will be another 35 years and another 35 years anniversary. So here we wish PANAAWTM keeps her role, very crucial role for Asian women and Asian American women to give stimulations and enrichment, comfort, and encouragement into their lives. And now I'm going to introduce a bit about the AWRC. As you can see, AWRC is the Asian Women's Resource Center for Culture and Theology. AWRC I think it has many similarities with PANAAWTM. It also conceived in 1987 and began by a group of women theologians who felt the need to form a community of Asian women engaged in feminist theology and inclusive ministry. So they wish to encourage them to articulate contextual theology from Asian American perspectives. Therefore, in the next year, 1988, in Hong Kong, AWRC was inaugurated. So what we do every year is we publish the IGI. This IGI was begun in 1982, which has a similar age with PANAAWTM. And this one is published in 1985. As you can see, it's very thin. And now, in order to prepare this greeting, I also found out this one. Maybe you feel quite familiar with it. This is responding to our core Asian and Asian American women of faith serving community. Actually, all the articles is taken from the PANAAWTM. Your sharing all are recorded in this IGI. It is in 1999 issue. And another 10 years, we also have Mary, Holy Spirit, and now, till now, IGI we published for 2019 issue is Caring for the Earth, Media, and the Truth. So here I would like to introduce what we do is first, we publish our publication IGI. IGI serves a theological reflection and resource material to students and of theologians and others, especially to women who are engaged in theologizing in their daily life. IGI is also a product of solidarity of a group of women in Asia who dreamed a world that was free from oppression and discrimination, and a world where the image of God was not violated and abused. So IGI also encourages students' attempts at feminist theologizing, and we welcome essays and articles from students of theology. The difference between the very special place for IGI also, IGI features art pieces, photos, paintings, sketches, any portray feminist theology of liberation in your contexts. So we here also welcome all present, all people, all women. You can write your article and reflection and submit to IGI. Also, we welcome you to go to our website. This is our website. You can subscribe to IGI and ask your library to subscribe to IGI. The second thing we do is we also facilitate workshops and conference to encourage not only theological students, also lay people to join the theological reflection, to encourage them to do Asian feminist theology. So in last year, we also held a workshop in Taiwan, and I want to take this opportunity to invite and welcome you to identify the needs of the Asian women and to join AWRC, also PANAAWTM together. So we hope to go hand in hand and create a better future for Asian women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I saw on the chat box, some of our members, they have issues of endorsed image, and they have consulted the journal for their own research. Thank you very much for your kind words and these best wishes for your ongoing ministry. First of all, I want to thank those of you who have posted on the chat box congratulating PANAAWTM for our 35th anniversary. And there are lots of comments and a lot of thank you to the 4 brilliant panelists. And I know that Nami has been monitoring the chat box. Nami, do you want to raise a few questions on behalf of members who have posted those questions in the chat box?
There are so many amazing comments in the chat box, and actually there's one question raised by Boyoung. So I'm going to read the question. How can PANAAWTM extend solidarity and friendship we build among ourselves to other minority groups in the BLM, Black Lives Matter time, while we address anti-Asian racism we experience in the US?
Thank you very much. This is certainly a very timely question. So any panelist who wants to jump right in?
Well, I think one important starting point is there was PANAAWTM did a webinar on racism and anti-Blackness, and there was I'm blanking on her name, but one of the panelists had an article about Asian American solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think the title was Solidarity, Not Allyship. And the framing was that we're not that there was a grounding in a shared history with white supremacy, that this is not a separate struggle. So it is a boundary crossing. There's an importance of recognizing the particularity of our different experiences, but there's also a shared history. So this isn't, this is, I'm thinking of the Lila Watson quote, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So I think at least beginning with that understanding that your liberation is bound up with mine, and we have shared history of fighting white supremacist violence. And it is for the good of all of us to band together and resist that.
I'll just add 2 things. So part of the shared history that Lisa is talking about is not always known among Asian and Asian Americans. So in the US context, it's helpful to think about the 1960s and 1970s, and you have leading Asians like Grace Lee Boggs and Yuri Kochiyama who are interlinking Asian liberation with the liberation of other peoples. So that's one point, is to raise the historical consciousness. And then secondly, actually some of my fondest memories of the early conferences I attended at PANAAWTM were very intersectional. I think we even had a conference, I forget exactly the title, but it was something like Women of Color or Intersectional, maybe 2014, 2013. and then the webinar that Lisa just mentioned, there are particular sensitivities that have to be thought through. So for instance, I'm calling in from Claremont, and the LA riots are still live memories for Asian Americans, especially Korean Americans, right? So there are certain sensitivities that people have to navigate, you know, in these forming of alliances and solidarities. But it's absolutely work that needs to be done.
Thank you very much. Do we have other questions?
We don't.
I saw that there is one comment or maybe a question. How can we both address Black Lives Matter and at the same time anti-Asian racism? You recall that earlier this year, because of COVID-19, then we had incidents of anti-Asian racism, and this certainly continues.
Pulan, there's one question just raised like a few seconds ago. That is, what is the relationship with PANAAWTM with other feminist groups like Black women and Latin American women theologians? So if any panelists can address, what is the relationship with PANAAWTM with other feminist groups like Black women and Latin American women theologians?
Let me begin with our origin. We began as a group of Asian and Asian American women who gathered in the fall in 1984 in the home of Professor Letty Russell at Yale Divinity School. And at that time, Professor Russell was a member of the anti-racism group of the National Church. And not only that, because we were so new, and Dr. Russell knows so many of womanists and also Muharista theologians and activists. And so they wanted them to share with us the insights of their movement. This is 35 years ago. And so in one of the early gatherings of PANAAWTM, I recall that Dr. Katie Cannon, Dr. Joe Martin, and sometimes maybe later, Dr. Ada Isasia Diaz, and they were part of the conversation. And sometimes we also consulted them in our beginning, how did they build their movement? And so we began picking their brains, and they were very generous with their insights and help. And not only that, there are also other organizations over the years that have been very helpful to us. In our beginning, the Women's Theological Center, located in Boston, was also helping us. And as we wanted to become a 501c organization, we certainly depend on the wisdoms of other networks. For example, WATER, Women's Alliance for Theology and Ethics, for their help as well. I wonder if other panelists want to share your perspectives.
Yeah, I think the questions raised by Boyoung Lee and Koi Dionko are related. And then PANAAWTM has a long history of a friendship with Black feminist and womanist groups and Latina feminist theological groups too. And I have seen that PANAAWTM theologians use both the intersectionality and transnationalism at the same time. What I mean by intersectionality, their analysis always focuses on the intersectionality of race, gender, sexuality, and also pay particular attention to recurring theology. And this intersectionality is generally shared method among Asian and Asian American feminist theologians and Latinx feminist theologians and womanist Black feminist theologians. So in terms of methodology, we share a lot of like a common method in addressing our problems and also bringing the particular experiences of these women. And at the same time, in order to use that intersectionality and transnationalism together, Asian American feminist theologians have addressed and also analyzed anti-Asian racism for a long time. but then they always understand that anti-Asian racism is always co-constitutive with anti-Black racism. In that way, we address, whenever we analyze anti-Asian racism, we painfully reflect on anti-Black racism within Asian and Asian American communities. And then also, I saw a lot of like our like PANAAWTM mothers and members' participation in other panels organized by womanist theologians and biblical scholars and Latinx scholars. Here, this one anecdote is, the Professor Tracy West is here, and I don't know whether she's still here. And last year at AAR, there was a book panel on Tracy West, solidarity and defiant spirituality. In that panel, Kwak Pil-lan was one of the panelists, and then she made a connection between PANAAWTM theology and Tracy West's transnational solidarity based upon like spirituality and religion in African diaspora. And whenever I just think about the panel and also read the Tracy West book, I keep thinking about, we share common methodology and we talk about diaspora, and yet our diasporic imagination becomes more multiple as we like cross multiple borders of identity and identities and race and like different borders. So in that way, I am very happy that we share a lot, like common method, and all groups work together to create solidarity.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If I may, there's another question raised by attendee Ban. The question is, how do we embody difference within the PANAAWTM?
This is a great question.
PANAAWTM, it is a very, very broad category of identity markers. And I think we have the potential as a community to engage with identity, not only to engage with difference, not only as a category outside and external, but also difference within. And this internal difference also not only within the community of a PANAAWTM, but also difference at an individual level as well. I think many a times when we think about identity, it tends to move towards a very an etymological understanding of identity, where it is identity as being synonymous with same the same. The challenge is to understand the ways in which this sameness is also informed by the different other. And to try to, and perhaps I think this understanding of an internal difference of a self will also help us to understand the mutual enrichment that happens with difference outside. And that difference is not a separation of the self and the other, but difference is relational. Difference in relationality. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I would leave it at that for now.
So Esther like beautifully theologizes differences. I think that's the core of like PANAAWTM theology. And then if I just add one more thing, if you trace the history of PANAAWTM as a name, I would say like a brand name and the name of the organization, it actually shows how we have been trying to embody our differences. I think Pul-lan or Rita can say that more. At first, it began as a small group of Asian women international students who studied theology at graduate school in the United States, and then they learned about other like Asian American graduate students in California. Then the name became like, there was a history of how we ended up having this PANAAWTM. I think Puilan can say that more.
Yes, as I explained, and the more we think that we should be more inclusive, and that is why we expand our name. And certainly when we expand our name, we were trying to make connections and also those in intersectional languages. But it does not mean to honor difference is easy for PANAAWTM. Let me just cite one example. The first time I saw Rita Brock dancing, I said, wow, mine, she is really an Asian American. That is the moves, the embodiment, very different. Later, when I saw Yia-Hei is joining us tonight, and I said, oh my gosh, you know, I don't think Asians will dance like that, because she grew up in Chicago, in South Chicago. And as you can see, when we talk about embodiment, we are talking about body gestures. We are talking about food. We are talking about how we have disciplined our body in a certain way. And so sometimes when we gather together, all these things, sometimes they will play out in a very subtle way. And certainly, for example, tonight we have 3 generations of PANAAWTMs. And again, you might have very subtle power dynamics as well. So I do not want just to glorify how well we have done, because the name is so long, that is so complex. For example, we may not have heard enough from our Pacific colleagues. And so tonight, we are very happy to have our Asian colleague, Reverend Chen, joining us. So in the future, we want to build on what we have done, what we have learned from the past, and together, we need to move forward. Mm-hmm. COVID-19 really shows us the world is so interconnected, and we cannot separate ourselves from our Asian sisters or Pacific sisters or Black colleagues, womanist colleagues, or Muharista and Latino colleagues as well. We must move together if we are going to save ourselves and also to save our planet. Because time is running, yes.
Okay. I have 3 more questions. Maybe okay. Panelists.
Why don't we ask all these questions?
Yes, I'm going to share all these 3 questions, and then each panelist may respond accordingly. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first question, I'm going backward. Given the complexities of identities we are becoming more aware of, what is the place of trans or non-binary persons in PANAAWTM? Second question, how should we engage with the surging Christian nationalism, which is closely related to a kind of toxic masculinity? Myself, I have been researching about how China mission is affected by this trend and the broader US-China tensions. The last question is, how have you all experienced PANAAWTM, understanding both the overlap and distinct needs of generations? For example, immigrant generation and American-born, as we navigate academia. So these are 3 different yet related questions.
I'm happy to jump in. Okay, so on the trans and gender non-binary. So one thing I noticed early on when I started attending is that PANAAWTM has a lot of women who identify as women, but are non-traditional in the sense that they are partnered but not married, they are married without children, or they are queer. Like this was always a part of PANAAWTM. And I would say in the last maybe 3 or 4 years in my own memory, we have had attendees who are trans and gender non-binary attend. And to my knowledge, these persons have been welcome. So I am not aware of any official statement that would exclude such persons. But this is only for me to say that I had my own impressions of what Asian American women in theology and ministry would be like when I first attended. And my mind was completely blown, right? Because in my mind, Asian folks would be like my parents, conservative evangelicals, right? So all of my impressions were completely blown. And so I hope PANAAWTM is a welcoming space for women identifying trans and gender non-binary.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I guess just to tag on to Grace's comment, I agree. I think that we envision ourselves as a liberationist space, and as a liberationist space, the role is to bring the margin to the center and to always be asking how that's shifting. And so I think that, like, for sure, efforts at inclusion, but also really the task is like actually seeking out people who are trans and non-binary to come, like actively invite, and then bring people in to ask about their theological imagination and their leadership. So an actual like active bringing into the center is what ought to be called for.
I'm glad to know that through this webinar, we are able to connect with our members who have joined us a long time ago. For example, I saw on the chat box, Reverend Matoyi Yamada, and she wrote, PANAAWTM inspired her to create the United Methodist Asian American and Pacific Islanders Clergy Association. And this organization has been there for 12 years old. And through PANAAWTM's influence, that she was able to create new networks and to work for solidarity. So as you can see that our impact is not just within academia, but certainly in churches and also in communities. So I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We are very grateful to our donors and funders and to the schools and centers that have hosted our meetings. Please support us by your donation. You can do this online on our website, panaawtm.org. The recording of tonight's session will be soon available on our newly created YouTube channel, PANAAWTM. Thank you. God bless.